I found 6 condoms in my husband's car, so I rubbed pepper on them and waited. My name is Ruth, and at 58 years old, I thought I knew everything about my husband Michael after 32 years of marriage. That was until last Thursday when I was searching for insurance papers in his car and found a box of 6 condoms hidden under the driver's seat. We haven't used protection in over 20 years, not since my tubal ligation. My hands trembled as I held that little box, my world suddenly shifting beneath me. Instead of confronting him immediately, something different came to mind. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button as I share how Michael discovered something spicy in our relationship. I met Michael at the university library when I was 22, and he was 24. I still remember how he approached me nervously asking if the chair next to me was taken. He had these kind, brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled, dark, wavy hair, and a soft-spoken manner that immediately put me at ease. We were both studying for finals, me for my English literature degree, him for business administration. What started as borrowed pens and shared textbooks quickly turned into coffee dates and long walks around campus. Our courtship was a whirlwind of late-night conversations, weekend road trips to the coast, and dreamy discussions about our future. Michael proposed just 8 months after we met during a picnic at our favorite spot by the lake. The ring wasn't fancy. He was still a struggling student, but I didn't care. I knew he was my person. We married in a small ceremony at my parents' garden. It wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect. White roses everywhere, my grandmother's lace tablecloths, and our closest friends and family. My father, who passed 5 years ago, cried when he walked me down the aisle. My mother kept saying she'd never seen me look so happy. Life started simple for us. We rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment near downtown. Michael began working at a small real estate firm while I taught high school English. We saved every penny we could, dreaming of buying our own home someday. Friday nights were sacred. We'd cook dinner together, open an affordable bottle of wine, and talk for hours about our weeks, our dreams, our fears. Jessica came along 3 years into our marriage. Unexpected, but deeply wanted. I still remember Michael's face when he first held her, tears streaming down his cheeks as he promised to always protect his little girl. Daniel followed 3 years later, completing our family. Those early years were a blur of sleepless nights, first steps, scraped knees, and bedtime stories. Buying our first home was a milestone we achieved when the children were still young. It wasn't our dream house by any means. The kitchen needed updating, the backyard was overgrown, and the basement flooded twice that first year. But it was ours. We painted every room ourselves, planted a garden, and hosted countless birthday parties and holiday gatherings. That house held our laughter, our arguments, our growing pains, and our reconciliations. Financial struggles were a constant companion through those years. Medical bills when Daniel broke his arm falling from a tree, car repairs when my old Honda finally gave out, college savings accounts that never seemed to grow fast enough. But we faced it all together, sitting at our kitchen table late at night, calculating and recalculating our budget. Michael's career began to flourish as the years passed. He moved from being a simple agent to opening his own boutique real estate firm, specializing in commercial properties. I watched with pride as he built his business from the ground up, working long hours, but always making it home for dinner with the family. He never missed a soccer game, a dance recital, or a parent-teacher conference. My own career evolved too. I left teaching when Daniel started school and moved into educational publishing, eventually becoming an editor for a major textbook company. I loved the work. It combined my passion for education with my love of language and allowed me more flexible hours to be there for our children. When Jessica graduated high school and headed to college, it felt like the end of an era. Daniel followed soon after, and suddenly our home was quiet. We found ourselves alone again, rediscovering each other after years of focusing on parenting. There were awkward moments at first, dinners, where we struggled to find conversation topics that didn't revolve around the kids. But slowly we found our way back to each other, planning weekend getaways and taking up new hobbies together. Michael started running, and I joined a book club. We renovated our kitchen and turned Jessica's old room into a home office. 5 years ago came the biggest test of our marriage. After a routine mammogram, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. The next months were a terrifying blur of surgeries, chemotherapy, and radiation. Michael was my rock through all of it. He took time off work to drive me to appointments, held my hand through every treatment, and reassured me I was beautiful, even as I lost my hair and struggled with my changing body. He researched every treatment option, joined support groups for spouses, and never once let me feel alone in my fight. The day my doctor declared me cancer-free, Michael planned a surprise celebration with our children and closest friends. I remember looking around the room at all the faces of the people I loved most in the world and feeling overwhelmingly grateful to still be here, to still have more time with them. Recovery wasn't easy. The cancer treatments left me with ongoing fatigue, and I made the difficult decision to retire early from my editing position. At first, I welcomed the rest, but as my strength returned, I began to feel increasingly untethered, struggling to find my purpose now that both work and active parenting were behind me. Meanwhile, Michael's business continued to grow. He hired more agents, expanded to a second location, and started working longer hours. I told myself it was natural. With me at home recovering, he needed to ensure our financial stability, especially with ongoing medical bills. But even after I was better, the long hours continued. Last year, Michael bought himself a new car, a sleek black luxury sedan that cost more than my first year's salary as a teacher. It seemed excessive to me, but he insisted he needed to project success to his high-end clients. He spent hours washing and detailing it every weekend, more time than he seemed to spend with me. As our home grew quieter and our conversations shorter, I couldn't help but wonder if this was just the natural evolution of a long marriage or if something more concerning was happening. Little did I know, the answer was waiting for me hidden under the driver's seat of that shiny new car. The first sign something was changing came about a year ago. Michael, who had always been comfortable in his slightly outdated wardrobe and had embraced his salt and pepper hair, suddenly became interested in his appearance in a way I'd never seen before. He joined an expensive gym across town rather than the community center, where we'd occasionally taken classes together. When I suggested we could go together, he explained that this gym had specific equipment he needed for his new training program. He started leaving early in the mornings, gym bag in hand, returning home to shower before heading to the office. Shopping bags from upscale men's stores began appearing in our closet. Designer shirts replaced his comfortable button-downs, expensive watches, new cologne that smelled nothing like the familiar scent I'd associated with him for decades. When I complimented him on a particularly nice shirt, he seemed almost embarrassed, mumbling something about needing to look more professional for his expanding clientele. The Michael I knew had always prioritized comfort over style and had often joked about those real estate guys who looked like they stepped out of a catalog. Now he was becoming one of them, and I wasn't sure what to make of it. Then came the late nights. Real estate had always required some evening work, showing properties to clients who couldn't view them during business hours, networking events, the occasional dinner meeting. But suddenly, these occurrences became more frequent. Twice then, 3 times a week, Michael would text that he needed to meet a client and wouldn't be home for dinner. When I asked about these clients over breakfast the next day, his answers were vague, the details inconsistent. Weekend property showings became common too. Michael would leave Saturday afternoons dressed in his best suit, explaining he had to show a particularly exclusive listing to out-of-town buyers. These showings often stretched into evening, sometimes resulting in Michael not returning until I was already in bed. His phone became an extension of his hand, constantly buzzing with notifications. He began taking calls in another room, his voice dropping to a whisper I couldn't quite make out. When I walked into his home office during one such call, he quickly ended it, explaining it was just work stuff, nothing interesting. The password on his phone changed. For years we'd known each other's passwords. Not because we regularly checked each other's devices, but because of the implicit trust between us. When I needed to use his phone to call Jessica while mine was charging and found I couldn't unlock it, Michael explained he'd had to change it for work security reasons. More concerning was how he now placed his phone face down whenever he set it on a surface, something he'd never done before. Sometimes, I'd notice him glancing at it during dinner, a small smile playing on his lips as he read whatever message had come through. Despite these changes, I tried to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. Perhaps he was working on a major property deal he didn't want to jinx by discussing it. Maybe he truly was focusing on his image to attract bigger clients. I didn't want to be the paranoid wife, especially after he'd been so supportive during my illness. Instead, I focused on what I could control, making our home a place he'd want to be. I tried new recipes, bought candles to create a relaxing atmosphere, suggested weekend activities. Most of my efforts were met with distraction or polite disinterest. "I'm not really hungry tonight. I grabbed something while I was out," he'd say when I prepared his favorite meal. "Can we rain check the movie? I've got to prepare some paperwork for tomorrow," when I suggested an at-home date night. I found myself looking critically at my reflection, noting the changes cancer and aging had brought. My hair had grown back differently after chemotherapy, thinner, with more gray that I chose not to dye. The medication I still took had caused some weight gain around my middle. Scars from my surgery had faded, but would never disappear completely. Was Michael losing interest in me because of these changes? I started making more effort with my appearance. New clothes, a different hairstyle, even makeup on ordinary days, though I'd never been one to wear much. These efforts went largely unnoticed. When I suggested a weekend getaway to the beach cottage, we used to love visiting, Michael seemed momentarily interested before checking his phone calendar and regretfully explaining he had too many appointments lined up. "Maybe next month," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. I began filling my increasingly empty days with volunteer work at the local literacy center. Teaching adults to read gave me purpose and connection I was missing, and I made new friends among the other volunteers. One of them was Linda, a vibrant 62-year-old widow with a refreshing directness I immediately appreciated. It was Linda who first voiced what I had been afraid to even think. "Ruth, I don't mean to overstep some," she said one day, over coffee after our volunteer shift, "but does Michael always work such long hours?" I explained about his expanding business, the new clientele, the demands of the real estate market. Linda listened patiently, stirring her coffee. "I only asked because I saw him last Wednesday at Bellini's, that new Italian place downtown. He was with a young woman, very well-dressed, attractive. They seemed familiar with each other." My heart sank, but I immediately defended him. "That must have been a client. Michael works with all sorts of people." "Maybe," Linda conceded, but her expression remained concerned. "They were holding hands across the table, Ruth." I dismissed her observation, insisting she must have misinterpreted what she saw, but her words planted a seed I couldn't quite shake. My daughter Jessica began calling more frequently, too. Our conversations, once filled with updates about her job and boyfriend, now often turned to concerned questions about me and her father. "How's Dad? Is he still working all those crazy hours?" she'd ask. "Is everything okay, Mom? You sound different." I reassured her that everything was fine, not wanting to worry her with suspicions that might be completely unfounded. My sister Barbara was less subtle during her monthly visit. As we sorted through old photographs for a family album I was creating, she put down a picture of Michael and me on our 25th anniversary and fixed me with a stern look. "Something's going on with you two. I can tell." "We're fine, just busy," I insisted. Barbara raised an eyebrow. "Ruth, you've never been a good liar. Look, I'm not saying anything is happening, but if you're worried, maybe you should check. Jim went through a weird phase when he turned 50. Bought that ridiculous motorcycle, started wearing leather jackets. Men get insecure about aging, too." I changed the subject, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. But later that night, as I lay awake listening to Michael's steady breathing beside me, I couldn't help wondering if Barbara was right. Should I be checking? And if so, for what exactly? I didn't want to become a suspicious prying wife. I didn't want to violate the trust we'd built over 32 years of marriage. But increasingly, I felt like I was living with a stranger, a well-dressed, cologne-wearing, password-protecting stranger who shared my husband's face, but little of his former warmth and openness. The first concrete evidence appeared on a rainy Tuesday morning. Michael had left for work, and I was gathering laundry when I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. It was from the Lakeside Hotel, dated the previous Thursday, a day he told me he was showing properties in the suburbs. Just a room charge and room service, 2 glasses of champagne, no name except his own. I stood in our bedroom staring at the small slip of paper, telling myself there could be an explanation. Perhaps he'd met clients there. Maybe he'd needed a quiet place to work between appointments and had treated himself to a drink. But 2 glasses, I tucked the receipt into my jewelry box and said nothing when Michael came home that evening. I needed more information before confronting him. I didn't want to make accusations based on a hotel receipt that might have an innocent explanation. The next clue came 2 weeks later. Michael had fallen asleep on the couch while watching a basketball game. His phone, lying on the coffee table, lit up with a text message. I wouldn't normally look, but the preview caught my eye. "Miss you. Thursday still good." The sender was saved simply as S. Just a single letter. My heart pounding, I fought the urge to grab his phone and read the entire conversation. Instead, I gently woke him and suggested he go to bed. He shuffled upstairs, leaving his phone behind. I stared at it for a long moment before following him upstairs, the message burning in my mind. That Thursday, Michael told me he had an industry dinner that would run late. "Don't wait up," he said, kissing me absently on the cheek before leaving. I sat at our kitchen table after he left a cold cup of tea, before me wondering who S was and where they were meeting. I felt sick with suspicion, but still couldn't bring myself to believe Michael was actually having an affair. There had to be another explanation. The next morning, Michael mentioned casually over breakfast that the dinner had been productive but dull. "Just a bunch of real estate agents talking shop," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. That same afternoon, his assistant Brenda called the house phone looking for him. "I just needed him to sign some paperwork before the weekend," she explained. "His cell's going straight to voicemail." "I thought he was at the office," I said, confusion evident in my voice. "Oh," Brenda paused. "No, he called in this morning to say he was working from home today." The lie was so blatant, I couldn't even formulate a cover for him. "I must have misunderstood," I said finally. "I'll have him call you when he gets back." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Michael had left the house that morning in his suit briefcase in hand, telling me he had back-to-back meetings at the office. Where was he actually going? Who was he with? The small lies were adding up to something I could no longer ignore. The receipt, the text message, the fictional office day. Each piece alone could be explained away, but together they formed a picture I didn't want to see. I called Linda, needing someone to talk to who wouldn't immediately jump to conclusions or judge Michael too harshly. "I think you need to find out for sure," she said after listening to my concerns. "Not knowing is worse than knowing, trust me." "How am I supposed to do that?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Follow him around town, hire a private investigator? I feel ridiculous even considering these things." "Start simple," Linda advised. "You can borrow my car tomorrow. He won't recognize it. See where he goes." The suggestion made me feel like a character in a bad television drama, but I agreed. The next day was Saturday, and Michael had already mentioned he needed to show a property to prospective buyers in the afternoon. That Saturday, I followed my husband of 32 years in my friend's blue sedan, keeping a careful distance as he drove not to the affluent suburb where he claimed the property was located, but to downtown. He parked in the lot of the Grand Hotel, one of the most expensive in the city. I found a spot across the street, my hand shaking on the steering wheel. 20 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up to the hotel entrance. A woman stepped out, tall, slim, stylishly dressed, and at least 20 years younger than me. My stomach clenched as Michael emerged from the hotel lobby, greeting her with a kiss that was decidedly not professional. I couldn't see her face clearly from that distance, but her body language was unmistakable. The way she leaned into him, her hand resting on his arm. They entered the hotel together, and I sat in Linda's car, tears streaming down my face, my worst fears confirmed. I didn't confront him that night when he returned home full of fictional details about the property showing and the supposedly interested buyers. I wasn't ready. I needed time to process what I'd seen, to decide what to do next. 3 days later came the moment that would change everything. Michael had left for a weekend conference in a neighboring city. I knew now there was no conference, but I didn't call him out on the lie. Instead, I took the opportunity to search for the insurance documents we needed for our tax filing, which Michael had mentioned were in his car. I used the spare key to open his precious new sedan, opening the glove compartment to look for the insurance papers. Not finding them there, I checked the center console, the door pockets finally reaching under the driver's seat in case they'd slid underneath. My hand touched a small box. Pulling it out, I found myself holding a package of 6 condoms. Not just any condoms, an expensive brand with a label boasting extra sensitivity. My vision blurred as I stared at the box. We hadn't used condoms since before I had my tubes tied after Daniel was born. Over 20 years. There was only one reason these would be in Michael's car, and the knowledge cut through me like a physical pain. I sat in the driver's seat of his car, holding the evidence of his betrayal, and something inside me hardened. The sadness was still there, the hurt profound, but alongside it grew a slow-burning anger. 3 decades of partnership, of building a life together, of supporting each other through challenges and celebrating triumphs. I had stood by him when his father died, when his first business venture failed, when he struggled with anxiety. He had stood by me through cancer, through my grief when my father passed, through my career changes. How could he throw all of that away? And for what? The excitement of a younger woman, the thrill of secrecy. I didn't want to be a victim. I didn't want to confront him in tears, the begging for explanations or pleading for him to choose me. I wanted him to face consequences for his actions in a way he'd never forget. I took the box of condoms back into the house with me, my mind racing with possibilities. I sat at our kitchen table that evening, the box of condoms before me, turning it over and over in my hands. My emotions cycled rapidly between devastating hurt, cold fury, and a strange, detached, analytical state where I considered my options with surprising clarity. I could confront Michael directly when he returned from his conference. I imagined the scene, me tearfully demanding answers, him initially denying everything before being forced to admit the truth when faced with evidence. There would be excuses, perhaps blame shifted subtly onto me or our circumstances. You've been distant since your illness. I felt neglected. It didn't mean anything. I could file for divorce immediately, have papers waiting when he returned. After 32 years together, did I want to end our marriage without even attempting to understand what had happened, without giving him a chance to explain or make amends? I could pretend I knew nothing, continue in this painful limbo of awareness while he carried on his deception. That option felt like a slow poison I couldn't tolerate. As I sat contemplating these unsatisfying choices, my laptop opened before me. I found myself typing "husband cheating" into a search engine. Amid the expected advice articles and lawyer advertisements was a link to a women's forum where wives shared stories of infidelity and how they handled it. One post in particular caught my attention. A woman described discovering her husband's affair and deciding on an unconventional response. Instead of immediate confrontation, she'd found a way to send a message that was both clear and impossible to dismiss. She had taken her husband's condoms and carefully applied hot pepper extract to them before returning them to their hiding place. He never directly admitted the affair, she wrote, but he certainly never cheated again. The message was received loud and clear without a single word spoken. The story made me laugh despite everything. The first genuine laugh I'd experienced in weeks. There was something poetically just about it. A private consequence that would affect only the guilty parties harmed no one permanently, but would certainly never be forgotten. I closed my laptop and picked up the box of condoms, again an idea forming. I wasn't typically vengeful, but this wasn't about vengeance. It was about standing up for myself, refusing to be a passive victim in my own marriage, and yes, ensuring there was a memorable consequence for betrayal. The next morning, I drove to a specialty spice shop across town. I'd done my research carefully. Regular hot sauce wouldn't work. Too thin, too obviously visible. What I needed was pure capsaicin powder or oil that could be applied invisibly. The shop owner, a friendly woman with graying dreadlocks, raised an eyebrow when I specifically requested their strongest cayenne pepper. Making something special. You could say that, I replied with a small smile. Something unforgettable. Back home, I set up my impromptu operation at the kitchen table. Disposable gloves, small scissors, the cayenne pepper, a tiny paintbrush from my old watercolor set, a roll of clear, nearly invisible tape. Working with surgical precision, I carefully opened each condom package at the edge, making sure not to damage the wrapper in a way that would be noticeable. Using the paintbrush, I applied a thin layer of cayenne pepper to the inside of each condom, focusing particularly on the tip area. The pepper was fine enough to be nearly invisible once dried. I resealed each package with the clear tape, pressing carefully to ensure the tampering wasn't evident. When finished, I surveyed my work with a strange mix of satisfaction and disbelief. Was I really doing this? This wasn't like me. I was Ruth Peterson, former English teacher, mother of 2 cancer survivor. I baked cookies for new neighbors and volunteered teaching adults to read. And yet, here I was preparing a fiery surprise for my cheating husband and his mistress. I returned the condoms to their box and set it aside. The real question now was, what to do after Michael experienced the effects of my handiwork. I needed to be prepared for what would follow. That afternoon, I made an appointment with a lawyer, not to file for divorce necessarily, but to understand my options. Our finances were entangled after 3 decades together. The house was in both our names. My retirement account was smaller than it should have been due to the years I took off to raise our children and my early retirement after cancer. The lawyer, a forthright woman in her 50s named Diane, laid out my options clearly. Michigan is a no-fault divorce state, she explained, but infidelity can sometimes influence property division and spousal support depending on circumstances. Do you have evidence of the affair? I mentioned what I'd seen and found, including the condoms. Document everything, she advised. Dates, times, observations. Take photos if possible. Keep any receipts or other physical evidence. Don't alter or tamper with anything that might be used in court. I chose not to mention my Cayenne project, knowing it wouldn't exactly strengthen a legal case. I left her office with a folder full of information and a clearer sense of my financial position. If divorce became necessary, I wouldn't be destitute, but I would need to make significant lifestyle adjustments. My next step was to examine our finances more closely. Michael had always handled most of our money matters, with me taking care of day-to-day expenses. Now I needed to know exactly where we stood. I spent hours going through bank statements, investment accounts, and credit card bills. What I found troubled me further. For the past 6 months, there had been regular cash withdrawals from our joint account. $500 here, $700 there. Nothing huge, but it added up to thousands of dollars unaccounted for. There were also charges I didn't recognize. At jewelry stores, upscale restaurants, and hotels. On a credit card I rarely checked. Gifts for his mistress, romantic dinners, more hotel rendezvous. I took photos of everything, creating a digital record of these financial breadcrumbs of infidelity. I wasn't sure if I'd need them, but Diane had emphasized the importance of documentation. That evening I called Jessica, not to tell her what I discovered. I wasn't ready to involve our children yet, but because I needed to hear my daughter's voice to be reminded of the family Michael and I had created together, the good that had come from our union regardless of what was happening now. "Mom, is everything okay? You sound weird," Jessica said immediately. "I'm fine, honey. Just a little tired. Tell me about your week." I redirected, not ready to share my suspicions or plans. As Jessica chatted about her job and the apartment she and her boyfriend were considering, I felt a wave of protective love. Whatever happened between Michael and me, I needed to minimize the impact on our children. They adored their father, and destroying that relationship would help no one. After our call, I returned to my bedroom and slipped the doctored condoms into my purse. Tomorrow, I would return them to their hiding place in Michael's car, and then I would wait. Michael was due home the following evening. I spent the day alternating between nervous energy preparing for the confrontation that would eventually come and periods of sadness so profound I could barely move from the sofa. In the afternoon, I returned to his car and carefully placed the box of condoms back exactly where I'd found them under the driver's seat. My hand lingered on the box for a moment. This small object that represented the potential end of my marriage now transformed into an instrument of revelation. Back in the house, I cleaned obsessively, scrubbing floors, organizing closets, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from spiraling into worst-case scenarios. By evening, our home gleamed with a perfection it hadn't seen since we'd hosted Jessica's engagement party 2 years ago. I prepared Michael's favorite dinner, roast beef with garlic mashed potatoes and glazed carrots, not as a peace offering, but as camouflage. I needed him to believe everything was normal, that I suspected nothing. He texted at 6 to say he was on his way, and I felt my heart rate accelerate. For 3 decades, Michael's return home had been a moment of comfort, of completion. Now it filled me with dread and a strange anticipatory tension. When his key turned in the lock, I was setting the table, the picture of domestic tranquility. "Something smells amazing," he said, setting down his overnight bag and coming to kiss me on the cheek, a gesture that now felt like a mockery. "How was the conference?" I asked, my voice impressively steady, as I placed silverware beside his plate. "Productive, exhausting, the usual." He loosened his tie and poured himself a glass of water. "They had us in sessions from 8 to 6 both days." More lies flowing so easily from him. Had it always been this way? Had there been other women before, other deceptions I'd missed or ignored? "I thought you might be hungry after the drive," I said, gesturing to the meal I'd prepared. Dinner proceeded with painfully normal conversation. I asked questions about the fictional conference. He provided detailed, fabricated answers. I shared anecdotes about my weekend, carefully edited to exclude my visit to the lawyer and my exploration of our finances. We discussed plans to visit Jessica in the coming month. All the while, I was acutely conscious of the secret waiting in his car, the timer ticking down to an explosion that would shatter this facade we were both maintaining for different reasons. 3 days passed with excruciating normality. Michael went to work, came home, ate dinner, watched television. I cooked, cleaned, read books I couldn't focus on, and waited. Thursday arrived, the day he often met S, according to the text message I'd glimpsed. Would he use one of the condoms today? Michael announced over breakfast that he had a dinner meeting with potential investors and would be home late. I nodded and wished him a productive day, fighting to keep my expression neutral. After he left, I found myself unable to sit still. I called Linda and met her for lunch, grateful for her company and the distraction she provided with stories of her recent cruise. I didn't mention what I'd done or what I was waiting for. Some things were too private to share even with a trusted friend. Friday morning, Michael called from work, his voice strained. "I'm not feeling well. Might be coming down with something. I'll probably be home early." My pulse quickened. "What kind of symptoms?" I asked innocently. "Just not feeling right," he said vaguely. "Probably just need some rest." He arrived home at noon, moving uncomfortably and heading straight for the medicine cabinet in the bathroom. I watched from the doorway as he swallowed 2 pain relievers. You don't look well, I observed, noting his pinched expression. Maybe you should see a doctor. It's nothing serious, he insisted. Just need to lie down for a bit. He spent the afternoon in bed, emerging only for more pain medication and water. I brought him tea and soup, playing the role of concerned wife while inwardly confirming my suspicions. The cayenne pepper had done its work. That evening, as we sat in the living room, me reading him scrolling tensely through his phone, I noticed him shift uncomfortably in his seat several times. His phone rang, and he glanced at the screen before declining the call. Work? I asked mildly. Just Brenda with a question that can wait until Monday, he said, but his expression was tight with what looked like both discomfort and anxiety. Later, I heard him in the bathroom running water for an unusually long time. When he emerged, his expression was a mix of pain, confusion, and growing suspicion. Did he know? Was he connecting the dots between his current discomfort and the condoms in his car? The weekend passed with Michael claiming to have some kind of flu, despite showing no fever or respiratory symptoms. He canceled plans, stayed home, and took frequent cool showers. By Monday, he announced he needed to see a doctor. I think I might be having an allergic reaction to something, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. That sounds serious, I replied. Do you want me to come with you? No, he said quickly. I'm sure it's nothing, probably just a new detergent or something. He returned from the doctor with a prescription cream and a story about contact dermatitis from new car leather. I nodded sympathetically and didn't comment when I noticed the condom box had disappeared from under his car seat the next day. Michael's behavior changed noticeably over the next week. The late-night meetings ceased. He came home directly after work. His phone remained conspicuously silent during evening hours. He was tense, watchful, and occasionally caught me looking at him with an intensity that seemed to make him nervous. Most tellingly, he began to make small overtures, bringing home flowers, one day suggesting we go out to dinner at my favorite restaurant. These gestures might once have delighted me, but now felt like guilt offerings from a man who knew he'd been caught, but wasn't ready to admit it. I accepted the flowers, went to dinner, and continued to wait. The confrontation was coming. I could feel it approaching like a storm on the horizon. I just needed to be ready when it broke. Exactly 2 weeks after the Cayenne incident, as I'd come to think of it in my mind, I decided it was time to bring everything into the open. The waiting game had served its purpose. Michael had clearly experienced the consequences of his infidelity in a way he wouldn't soon forget, and his behavior suggested he at least suspected I knew something. The tension between us had become unbearable, a third presence in every room we occupied together. I chose a Tuesday evening when I knew we'd have privacy. The children wouldn't be visiting, and Michael had no excuses to be out. I prepared a simple dinner, nothing special or celebratory. This wasn't an occasion for his favorite meal or a nice bottle of wine. After we ate, I asked Michael to join me in the living room. He followed with visible apprehension, perhaps sensing from my tone that something significant was about to happen. On the coffee table, I had placed 3 items: the hotel receipt I'd found in his jacket, a printed copy of our bank statement showing the mysterious cash withdrawals, and the now empty condom box. I'd kept one of the condoms aside as evidence, not that I expected him to deny what they were or why he had them. Michael stopped short when he saw the items arranged neatly before his usual seat on the couch. His face drained of color, and he remained standing as if unwilling to get closer to the physical evidence of his betrayal. "What is this?" he asked, though it was clear from his expression he knew exactly what it was. "Please sit down, Michael," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected it to be. "I think it's time we talked honestly with each other." He sank slowly onto the couch, his eyes fixed on the condom box. "Ruth, I can explain," he began, but I raised a hand to stop him. "Before you start creating more stories, I want you to know what I know," I said quietly. "I found that receipt weeks ago. I've seen the unexplained withdrawals from our account. I watched you meet a young woman at the Grand Hotel when you were supposed to be showing a property in Lakewood Heights. And yes, I found those I pointed to the condom box hidden in your car. Michael's shoulders slumped. He looked suddenly older, the confident, rejuvenated man of recent months, replaced by someone weary and cornered. How long have you known? He asked finally. Long enough, I replied. Who is she, Michael? He stared at his hands for a long moment before answering. Her name is Stephanie. She works in commercial property management. We met at a networking event last fall. Stephanie, I repeated. The mysterious S from his text messages now had a name and identity. Somehow that made it both more real and more painful. And how long has this been going on? About 8 months. He admitted, still not meeting my eyes. 8 months. While I was still adjusting to life after cancer, finding my footing in early retirement, wondering why my husband seemed increasingly distant. 8 months of lies, of secret rendezvous, of betrayal. Why, I asked the question that had been haunting me since I first suspected something was wrong. Why her? Why now, after 32 years? Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen countless times throughout our marriage. It's not simple, Ruth. I have time, I said, settling back in my chair, determined to hear whatever explanation he could offer. He was silent for several moments, organizing his thoughts, or perhaps deciding how much to reveal. After your cancer, he began hesitantly, everything changed, not just physically, but between us. You were focused on recovery as you should have been. I was terrified of losing you, of being alone. When you got better, I thought things would go back to normal, but they didn't. You seemed different. I felt different. So you found someone who made you feel the way you used to. I suggested, keeping my tone neutral, despite the pain his words caused. It wasn't planned, he continued. Stephanie was just someone I talked to at an event. She laughed at my jokes, asked about my business, seemed interested in me as a person, not just as a caretaker or provider. It was flattering. We exchanged numbers for professional reasons, but then you started texting and meeting for coffee, and eventually ended up in hotel rooms together. I finished for him. He nodded, misery evident in every line of his face. She made me feel young again, desired, important. And I didn't, I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice now. You had other priorities, recovering, finding your new purpose after retirement. We barely talked anymore except about practical matters. I wanted to protest, to point out that his increasing absences and distraction had contributed to our growing distance, but I held back. This wasn't about assigning blame. I needed to understand. Did you ever intend to leave me for her? I asked the question that frightened me most. No, Michael said quickly, finally looking directly at me. Never. I know that sounds ridiculous given everything, but I never wanted to end our marriage. I just got caught up in how she made me feel. I nodded slowly, processing his words. There was probably truth in them, mixed with the self-justification people naturally create to live with their worst actions. There's something else you should know, I said after a moment. Michael looked at me questioningly. Those condoms you found in your car, I found them first. And before putting them back, I applied cayenne pepper to the inside of each one. His eyes widened in shock, then understanding dawned on his face as he connected his recent allergic reaction to my revelation. That was you. You did that. His voice held equal parts disbelief and embarrassment. I did, I confirmed, a small grim smile touching my lips. I considered many options when I found out you were cheating Michael. That one seemed fitting. He winced, shifting uncomfortably at the memory. It was effective. I thought it might be. Did Stephanie enjoy the experience as well? Michael's face flushed deep red. We don't need to discuss that. Actually, I think we do, I countered. I think we need to discuss everything if there's any hope of moving forward from this together or apart. The confrontation continued late into the night. There were tears, from both of us, recriminations and defenses, painful truths and reluctant admissions. Michael confessed that he had ended things with Stephanie the day after the pepper incident, too embarrassed to explain what had happened and suddenly aware of the potential cost of his actions. She's been calling and texting, but I haven't responded, he admitted. I told her I needed space to think. By the time we exhausted ourselves with talking, dawn was approaching. No decisions had been made about our future, but the truth, painful as it was, now lay between us, no longer hidden behind lies and secrets. I think you should stay somewhere else for a while, I said finally. I need space to think, to decide what I want. Michael nodded, resignation in his posture. I understand. I'll pack a bag in the morning. As he headed upstairs, shoulders slumped in defeat, I remained in the living room, emotionally drained, but somehow lighter for having finally confronted the situation head on. The uncertainty of the future stretched before me, frightening, but also full of possibility. For the first time in months, I felt I had regained some control over my life, whatever I ultimately decided to do with it. Michael moved into a hotel the next morning, taking only essential belongings and his work materials. The house felt strangely empty without him, even though he'd been emotionally absent for months. 32 years of sharing space creates habits and expectations that persist even when the relationship itself has changed. I found myself listening for his key in the door at the usual time, automatically setting 2 places for dinner, turning to share observations with someone who wasn't there. These small moments of realization were like paper cuts, minor individually, but painful in their accumulation. The first week passed in a blur of practical considerations. I informed our children of the separation, trying to present the situation factually without vilifying their father. Jessica cried on the phone, full of questions I couldn't fully answer. Daniel's response was anger directed primarily at Michael. How could he do this to you, Mom? After everything you've been through. I found myself in the strange position of defending the man who had betrayed me. People make mistakes, Daniel. Complicated ones. Your father is still the man who raised you, who loves you. This is between him and me. I spoke with the lawyer again, not to file for divorce, but to understand what a formal separation would entail. Michael and I agreed to a temporary financial arrangement that would sustain us both while we decided our next steps. Linda and my sister Barbara became my lifelines during this period, providing emotional support without judgment. Barbara stayed with me for a week, filling the house with her practical energy and straightforward advice. You don't have to decide anything right away, she reminded me. Take time to figure out what you really want, not just what you think you should want or what others expect you to do. Michael called regularly, his voice careful and tentative, checking on practical matters and asking how I was doing. Our conversations were civil, but strained, the easy familiarity of decades together, now overlaid with pain and uncertainty. 3 weeks into our separation, he asked if we could meet for coffee. Just to talk, he assured me. No pressure. We met at a quiet cafe halfway between our house and his hotel. Michael looked tired, the confident businessman persona subdued. He'd lost weight, and his typically impeccable clothing seemed slightly rumpled. Thank you for meeting me, he said as we settled at a corner table, 2 steaming mugs between us. I've been doing a lot of thinking. So have I replied, wrapping my hands around my mug for warmth and comfort. I want to come home, Ruth, he said directly. I miss you. I miss our life together. What happened with Stephanie was a terrible mistake, the worst I've ever made. If you'll give me another chance, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you. I studied his face, searching for sincerity. The Michael before me seemed genuine in his remorse, but I had thought I knew this man completely for 32 years, only to discover I'd missed signs of profound unhappiness and dissatisfaction. It's not that simple, I said finally. You didn't just have a one-night stand, Michael. You carried on a relationship for months. You lied repeatedly. You spent our money on another woman. You risked your health and mine. How can I ever trust you again? He nodded, accepting the validity of my concerns. I know. I've been seeing a therapist these past weeks, trying to understand why I did what I did. It's no excuse, but I was going through my own crisis. about aging, about my role in life now that the kids are grown. Stephanie made me feel young and important again when I was afraid of becoming irrelevant. And I couldn't help asking. It wasn't about you, Ruth. It was about my own insecurities, my own fears. I took the easy path of external validation instead of dealing with my issues honestly, instead of talking to you. His words echoed some of my own realizations during our time apart. Our marriage had stalled in recent years as we both navigated significant transitions. My cancer and early retirement, his business evolution, our empty nest. We had stopped truly communicating, each retreating into separate concerns without bringing the other along. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Michael continued when I remained silent. Counseling, transparency with my schedule and finances, anything that would help rebuild trust. I know it would take time. I know I have no right to expect forgiveness, but I love you, Ruth. 32 years together means something to me. I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. I'm not ready to make any permanent decisions in either direction. I'm still processing everything that's happened, but I am willing to try marriage counseling to see if there's anything left worth saving. The relief on Michael's face was palpable. That's all I'm asking for, a chance to try. We parked our car into a lot near a small office building. The sign next to Suite 204 read, Marianne Wilson LMFT, Marriage and Family Therapy. Michael and I sat awkwardly in the waiting room, like strangers assigned adjacent seats on a bus. Marianne turned out to be a direct, no-nonsense woman in her 60s with silver hair and perceptive green eyes that seemed to see straight through pretense. In our first session, she established clear ground rules. I'm not here to assign blame or determine who's right, she explained. My job is to help you communicate effectively and decide if this relationship can be rebuilt in a way that serves you both. That will require complete honesty, even when it's painful. Can you both commit to that? We nodded, and so began our weekly sessions. Difficult emotional conversations that often left us drained, but slowly cleared away decades of unspoken assumptions and expectations. Michael moved back home after our fourth counseling session, but into the guest bedroom. We were trying to rebuild our relationship step by step, beginning with friendship and basic trust before considering physical intimacy again. There were setbacks, moments when I was overwhelmed by renewed anger, or when Michael grew defensive about constant scrutiny. But there were also breakthroughs, heartfelt conversations that went deeper than we'd gone in years, new understandings of each other's needs and fears, small gestures that demonstrated commitment to change. Parallel to our joint counseling, I began seeing a therapist on my own, focusing on my personal healing rather than just the marriage. Dr. Kelman helped me recognize how I had allowed my identity to become subsumed in my roles as wife and mother, how cancer had forced me to confront mortality, but also created an opportunity to redefine myself. What would bring you joy now, Ruth? She asked in one session. Not what would make Michael happy or what would look good to others, but what would make you feel alive and purposeful. The question stayed with me, prompting me to reconnect with old interests I'd set aside. I joined a creative writing group at the community center, rediscovering my love of words and storytelling. I started volunteering more regularly at the literacy center, finding fulfillment in helping others discover the power of reading. 6 months into our reconciliation attempt, Michael and I took a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin, neutral territory where we could relate to each other outside the loaded environment of our home. Walking along the shore at sunset, I felt him take my hand tentatively, a question in the gesture. I let my fingers entwine with his, not yet certain of our future, but open to the possibility that we might find our way back to each other, changed, but perhaps stronger for having faced the near destruction of everything we built together. It's been 2 years since I found those condoms in Michael's car and made my unconventional choice to respond with cayenne pepper rather than immediate confrontation. 2 years of hard work, painful honesty, and gradual rebuilding. The journey of healing began with focusing on myself. I had spent decades being someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's colleague. Cancer had already forced me to reassess my identity, but Michael's affair pushed me to truly reclaim myself as an individual. At first, it was excruciating. There were days when grief overwhelmed me, not just for the betrayal, but for the loss of the untarnished history I thought we had. 32 years of memories now had to be re-examined through a new lens. Had there been signs I missed earlier infidelities I'd been blind to? The foundations of my life felt unstable quicksand beneath my feet. Dr. Kelman guided me through this period with steady compassion. Grief isn't linear, she reminded me. You'll have good days and bad days. The goal isn't to forget, or even necessarily to forgive right away, but to process what happened so it doesn't define you going forward. I leaned heavily on my support network. Linda accompanied me to art exhibitions and concerts, filling evenings that might otherwise have been lonely. My sister called daily, her practical affection a constant reassurance. Jessica visited more frequently, our relationship deepening, as I allowed her to see me as a complete person with vulnerabilities, not just as her infallible mother. Most surprisingly, Daniel became a source of strength. My son, always more reserved emotionally than his sister, sent thoughtful texts and called regularly. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he told me during one conversation. "However this turns out, you're handling it with incredible grace." The writing group I joined became an unexpected lifeline. Putting words to my experience, even in fictionalized form, helped me process emotions too complex for ordinary conversation. The women in the group, ranging from 30-something mothers to widows in their 70s, offered perspectives and wisdom from their own life journeys. Physically, I began taking better care of myself, not to compete with a younger woman or to win Michael back, but because I deserved that care. I joined a gentle yoga class designed for cancer survivors, reconnecting with my body after years of seeing it primarily as something that had betrayed me with illness. I experimented with new hairstyles and clothes that expressed who I was now, not who I'd been 20 years ago. Meanwhile, Michael was undergoing his own transformation. His individual therapy sessions revealed patterns of seeking external validation that stem from childhood experiences with a critical father. He recognized how he transferred that need for approval to younger colleagues, clients, and ultimately to Stephanie, whose admiration temporarily filled a void within himself. In our joint counseling, Marianne helped us develop new communication patterns. We learned to recognize triggers and defensiveness, to express needs without accusation, to listen, without immediately formulating rebuttals. It wasn't easy. Decades of habitual interaction don't change overnight, but gradually we began truly talking again. "I never stopped loving you," Michael told me during one session, his voice breaking. "Even during the affair, it wasn't about not loving you." I know that sounds impossible to believe. Then why? I asked the question that had haunted me from the beginning. "Because I wasn't loving myself," he answered after a thoughtful pause. "I was running from my own aging, my own mortality, my fear of irrelevance. Stephanie was just a distraction from having to face those fears." It wasn't an excuse, and we both knew it, but it was an explanation that finally made sense to me, that aligned with the man I had known for over 3 decades, rather than the stereotype of the middle-aged husband trading in his wife for a newer model. Rebuilding trust happened in small increments. Michael gave me complete access to his phone, email, and calendar. He called when he was running late. He provided receipts without being asked. These gestures, which might have seemed controlling in a healthy relationship, were necessary stepping stones back to normal trust. A turning point came about a year after our separation, when Michael's mother was hospitalized with pneumonia. In the hospital waiting room, watching him pace with worry, I realized something important. Despite everything that had happened, he was still the person I wanted beside me in life's difficult moments. The person whose hand I wanted to hold when receiving bad news. The person whose joy I wanted to witness when celebrating good news. That night, for the first time since discovering his affair, I invited him back into our bedroom. Our physical reconnection was tentative, emotional, and healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't about reclaiming territory or competing with memories of a younger woman. It was about choosing each other again with full awareness of our capacity to hurt one another and our commitment not to. Today, our marriage is different than it was before the affair. Not necessarily better or worse, but more conscious. We no longer take each other for granted or assume we know what the other is thinking. We schedule regular check-ins to discuss feelings and concerns before they fester into resentment. We pursue both joint activities and individual interests, maintaining our connection while nurturing our separate identities. I won't pretend the affair is forgotten. There are still moments when something triggers the memory, a glimpse of a certain model of car, the name Stephanie mentioned casually in conversation, a commercial for that hotel downtown. The pain has dulled, but the scar remains a permanent marker of what we almost lost. Michael sees these moments in my expression and doesn't dismiss them. Sometimes he simply says, "I'm sorry," without defensiveness or expectation of reassurance. Other times he asks, "What do you need right now?" and listens to the answer, whatever it may be. I've learned that forgiveness isn't a single decision, but a daily choice. Each morning I wake up and choose to continue building this new version of us, rather than dwelling in the pain of the past. Not because what happened doesn't matter, but because I refuse to let it determine my future. The most profound lesson from this experience has been about self-worth. For too long, I had defined myself through the lens of my relationships to others. My husband's betrayal painful, as it was forced me to recognize and claim my intrinsic value, not as someone's wife, mother, or colleague, but simply as myself. I don't know if our marriage will last another 30 years. I don't know what challenges might still lie ahead, but I do know that whatever happens, I will be all right. Sometimes it takes a dash of cayenne pepper in life to awaken us to our own strength, to burn away illusions and leave behind what's real and worth fighting for. If you've ever faced betrayal in your relationship, how did you respond? Did you confront the situation immediately or take time to consider your options? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories of resilience and healing. Remember, sometimes the most painful chapters of our lives lead to the most profound growth. Thank you for listening, and until next time, be kind to yourself as you navigate life's unexpected turns.